Good afternoon. Welcome to City Power, Powercore and United Energy's webinar on Victoria's emergency backstop mechanism for rooftop solar. My name is Pat Stafracci. I'll be your facilitator, and on behalf of all three networks, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which City Power, Powercore and United Energy operate, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Next slide, please. One more. During this session, we'll take you through the emergency backstop, what it means to you, and demonstrate how it will change the way you connect solar for all applications received after 1 October 2024. The presenters, whom I'll introduce shortly, will walk through some common scenarios and join us for a Q&A later in the session. We will also present some of our new resources to help guide solar installers and administrative staff across the connection journey of all three distribution networks. These resources, along with a range of content to support your businesses and your engagement with customers, will be made available on our websites in the coming days. Links to the emergency backstop web pages will be shared during and after this session. This webinar will be recorded and published online for later viewing. You will be directly notified via the email address you registered under once the recording is available. I'd also like to thank you for submitting questions during your registration. Your questions have helped guide our presentation and the common scenarios we're about to walk you through. If you'd like to submit a question that we haven't covered during the presentation, please do so via the chat box. If we are unable to respond to your question today, we will follow up over email. Next slide, please. To introduce the networks, City Power, Powercore and United Energy are three of the 5 electricity distributors in Victoria, covering more than 2/3 of the state. We supply electricity to almost 2 million homes and businesses across Victoria and manage around 35,000 requests for solar connections on our networks. The information you will hear will apply to all three distribution networks, with only cosmetic differences because of each network's connections portals. Next slide, please. Today, you will hear from 3 of our team members who have worked closely on the implementation of the emergency backstop across all distribution networks. First, Andrew Bailey is the Head of Network Program Management and the Program Manager of our Emergency Backstop project, leading the implementation of this mechanism. Next, Charmaine Volpe is the Manager of New Energy Services with more than 15 years' experience in operational roles, delivering new energy solutions. And finally, we have David Denny, a Special Projects Manager and Technical Specialist who works closely with solar inverter manufacturers to onboard devices into our Low Voltage Distribution Energy Management System, or LVDEMS for short. Each of our presenters will be able to answer any technical, connections, or customer-related questions you may have. Once again, thank you for joining us. I'll now hand it over to Andrew to introduce the emergency backstop.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pat, and welcome everybody to our webinar. So why do we need an emergency backstop? So across our 3 networks, we're nearing 3 gigawatts of solar generation connected, and we typically connect in excess of 200 megawatts a year. And it's this increase in renewable, non-controllable generation that is contributing to minimum system load or minimum demand. I want to point out that this is not confined to Victoria. Minimum system load is a whole of the national electricity market issue. South Australia and Queensland already have backstop mechanisms, and the other states in the NEM will be implementing them soon too. If you look at the graph at the top right of this screen, it shows that Victoria experienced a new minimum demand event of just over 15,500 megawatts on New Year's Eve last year. So at that level of demand in Victoria, Victorian DNSPs were on the cusp of being called to respond, but we ended up not needing to. If you then cast your eyes to the bottom right graph, that new minimum demand record is reflected by what's inside the red circle there. You can see that the minimum demand has been trending steadily down for the last few years, and the forecast is for it to continue to drop. And that is why Victoria needs to implement an emergency backstop mechanism now. Next slide, please. So the Victorian government has introduced the emergency backstop in two stages. Stage 1 applied to systems greater than 200 kVA, and that was introduced in October last year. Stage 2 applies from the 1st of October this year, and it applies to all new, upgraded and replacement rooftop solar systems, which must be emergency backstop enabled. Note that it does not apply to existing rooftop solar systems. Emergency backstop enabled means that we, City Power, Powercor and United Energy, must be able to reduce the output from rooftop solar systems. We're only able to do this in two scenarios. One, when directed by AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Operator, and two, when testing this capability so that we can respond when we need to. Emergency backstops means that there are some new requirements to our solar connections process, and that's what we're here to share today. By introducing these new steps to our process, we keep the grid secure, we keep the lights on, we keep the Wi-Fi working and your Netflix streaming. We continue to enable homes and businesses to connect solar and continue to export. Our ask of you during this session is to understand what we're presenting, ask questions and implement these new requirements, and explain them to your customers so they're aware of the new mechanism and their obligations. I'll now hand over to Charmaine, who will go through the process changes in detail.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. As we've heard, the new mandate brings new processes and requirements, both on-site as part of the physical solar installation, but also as part of the application process. One of our fundamental objectives throughout this change has always been to ensure that we can streamline the process as much as possible and that the design changes to our portals are intuitive and easy for our installers and RECs to adapt to. You'd all likely be familiar with our existing portals, eConnect for City Power and Powercor, and My Energy for United Energy. We've simply enhanced our existing portals and application forms to cater for the required changes. So this means that you don't have to worry about learning new systems or having additional forms to fill in. Our existing solar pre-approval form and the solar alteration request has been expanded to cater for the extra steps and the additional information that we'll need to capture. So as part of today's webinar, I will walk you through what are the steps to connection will look like and from the perspective of a solar retailer or installer. And then I'll take you through a video demonstration of what some of the key changes will look like within our actual portal. So for the purpose of today, we're looking at our City Power and Powercor steps to connection, and we'll be using our eConnect portal for the video demonstration. But as Pat mentioned, our United Energy is just purely a replication of the same process, and it's purely just cosmetic differences. So we established the steps to connection infographic to break down each of the key stages within the connection process and to help articulate the key changes or requirements within each of the steps. The steps to connection can be broken down into two segments, before you go and while on site. Starting with before you go, we have the pre-sale and the application and offer stage. The pre-sale is where you're having the initial conversations with customers that are thinking about getting solar and helping them to better understand their needs and suitable options. It's going to be important at this stage in the process to ensure customers understand their requirements and that they have an understanding of the solar installation process. That the inverter and software communication clients that they are interested in are CEC approved and CCIP Oz ready. You'll also need to refer to our website to check that the device has been onboarded with us by the manufacturer. If the inverter or software comms client has not been onboarded with us, the customers will still be able to install their solar system. However, zero export will need to be applied. Lastly, you will need to ensure that the customer has a reliable internet connection. Under the ministerial order, solar systems between 0 to 30 kVA, if unable to practically connect to the internet, need to apply the network's low static limit. So for City Power, Powercor and United Energy, this means zero export must be applied. For installations greater than 30 kVA and equal or less to 200 kVA, the solar installation must be emergency backstop enabled. So if not via the internet connection, they have to install a generator monitor meter, as an alternative solution. However, the easiest and most cost-effective solution is a reliable internet connection. So it's going to be really important that customers are across all of this so that they can make a well-informed decision on their investment and to understand their requirements. Once the customer has confirmed that they wish to proceed with an application and offer, you'll need to engage with the manufacturer to ensure that you have all of the required hardware. This includes an export limiting meter, which is required for all installations. A solar pre-approval application will need to be submitted by eConnect for City Power and PowerCore, or My Energy for United Energy. A copy of the pre-approval outcome will need to be provided and discussed with the customer. The mandate applies to all solar pre-approvals submitted from 1 October 2024. So all pre-approvals submitted prior to this date do not need to comply with the new requirements if the installation occurs prior to the approval expiration date. Expiry dates will be the same as they currently are, so 90 days for all pre-approvals that fall within our model standing offer. Our model standing offer and generator agreements have been altered to include all of the terms and conditions that relate to the ministerial order. And our pre-approval outcome has also been uplifted to include key information outlining the new requirements. So I'll now go through the while you're on site stages. So first we have the install. You will need to ensure that you're installing an approved CCIP Oz Ready inverter and software communication client, and that you also install an export limiting meter. This is required to ensure that excess energy remains within your approved export limit and that your capability test can pass successfully. Installation must be completed as per the manufacturer's installation guide. You will need to configure the inverter and the associated equipment to the customer's internet. This can be hardwired or via a Wi-Fi. And you'll need to ensure that the latest firmware is updated and the Australian A region settings are applied as per the AS4 777.2 guidelines. Moving over to register, after the installation is completed, the communication device, being either an inverter, gateway or aggregator, must be registered via the manufacturer's app. Once registered within the app, the manufacturer generates a 40-character long-form device identifier, which is also known as an LFDI. This is a unique code that has a one-to-one relationship with the corresponding NIMI for the site of the installation. As part of the changes in the alteration request, the installer must verify the registration of the communication device in our portal. There are two types of registration methods. Inbound, where if the OEM has the capability, they will generate the LFDI and automatically share this to our server, where it's linked with an associated NIMI, meaning you'll just need to select verify in our portal and you will then see a successful message to notify you that it's all complete. The other method is out of band, and this is where the 40-digit LFDI will be shared with you in the OEM app. You'll need to copy and paste this into the LFDI field in our portal and then hit verify and await the successful confirmation. Registration can be done both on-site or remotely if you've left the site. However, to avoid any risk to having to return to site, we do recommend you complete this on-site as part of your installation. For failed registration, we recommend calling your OEM to confirm setup and LFDI has been generated successfully. If your OEM confirms that all is okay on their end, then please call through to our new energy services team, who will be able to further assist you. Moving over to the test stage. After registration is successfully completed in our portal, you will then move through to the capability test. The capability test will confirm that the installed solar system is connected and can receive our commands. We have reference in the portal to the preparation steps to prepare for a successful capability test. Once ready, you'll be able to initiate the capability test by clicking the Run Test button. Each test will be displayed on the screen for you to see and will be completed one at a time with a pass or fail result. Where the test fails, you will see an error message to help inform you of why the test has failed. The capability test should take roughly between 5 to 10 minutes, and like registration, it can be done remotely. However, we also recommend that this is completed at the time of the installation. We lastly move to closeout. So after successful registration and capability test, the remaining steps are as per the standard process today. So you'd have your LEI come and inspect and sign off on the site, and then you'd be able to upload your certificate of electrical safety and evidence of your Australian A settings being applied before submitting your request ready for the reconfiguration. So that covers the end-to-end connection steps. So moving over to the next slide. This is just sort of a summary of what we've just discussed in terms of the connection options. So for system sizes that fall within the 0 to 30 kVA, they need to be CSIP Oz compliant and connected with an internet. For sites that fall greater than 30 up to 200 kVA, they must either be CSIP Oz compliant with internet or be connected via a generator monitor meter. Moving through to the next slide. So our websites are being redesigned to ensure that the new processes and the support material is readily available and easily accessible. You'll be able to use the website to reference things like the steps to connection and the portal demonstration videos, which we'll have a look at now. So starting off with applying for a solar pre-approval. Perfect. So the next one we'll take a look at is the registering a device. This one's undertaken in the alteration request. Okay, and lastly, we'll demonstrate the steps to completing a DER capability test. This one is also conducted in the existing alteration request. So as you can see, we've tried to keep the changes to our portal minimal and have very much kept the changes in alignment with the current process that exists today to ensure it's simple and easy to adapt to. We understand that there is a lot of changes to be familiar with and that it's going to be very, very new for everyone that's involved in the process. To help ensure that you have the support you need, we've been working over the last few months to upskill our teams and prepare them to be able to assist you with anything you may need help with. So our New Energy Services team will be your first point of call and will be available to respond to your calls Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We've set up a dedicated phone number direct into this team, or you can continue to call through to the REC lines and select option 3. If you have questions outside of these hours, you can also email us at newenergyservices@powercall or unitedenergy.com.au and we'll respond the next business day. For all issues that require technical investigation, we have a team of experts that will be ready to assist with troubleshooting and the more technical issues. These may not always be able to be resolved immediately, but we'll be working very closely with this team to respond to your issues as efficiently as possible. We will also have information, support materials, and FAQs available on our website for you to self-serve. This is going to be a learning journey for everyone, including our business and our teams. And we welcome any feedback and appreciate your patience and support as we work together through this transition and how we can best support and ensure that we achieve the best outcomes for our mutual customers. I'll now pass you back to Andrew, who will summarise some of the key takeaways.
Thanks, Charmaine. So just revisiting everything we've gone through again. Just a reminder that the stage 2, so the emergency backstop for rooftop solar systems up to 200 kVA, applies to pre-approvals submitted from the 1st of October. Emergency backstop applies to all new, upgrading and replacement systems. So existing systems or those with a pre-approval before the 1st of October, are not required to be emergency backstop enabled. Please check the Clean Energy Council to make sure that your inverter is CCPOS ready and your software communication client is also approved. Check our website to confirm that the OEM has been onboarded with us. A reminder that a reliable internet connection is required and training and educational content will be available on our websites. Thanks, Amanda. If you want to skip ahead a couple of slides, I'll go through a couple of scenarios that have been informed by questions we've received ahead of this webinar. So thank you to everybody who submitted questions in advance. So scenario 1, no internet connection. So for example, if a property is under construction or multiple properties are under construction and there's no customers there yet, and obviously there's no internet. So we have a couple of requirements in that the house or the house in question must have a supply available with a NIMI and a solar pre-approval application. There's pretty much two options here. So the registration and capability testing component can be completed via a hotspot, and the pre-approved export limit can be set. Then when the hotspot goes away and the connection is lost, the default export will be 0. Later, when the customer moves in and connects the inverter to the internet, they will revert to the pre-approved export limit from before, and there should be no need for a second visit. Or if it can't be completed at the time of installation, it can be done once the customer has moved in and established the internet. Next scenario, thanks. So a customer changes the internet provider. So the customer is then responsible for connecting their new internet to the inverter, and then exports will resume. Also, I'll add that if the inverter loses communication with the internet, we will advise the customer once that happens after a period of 7 days, and it's the customer's responsibility to ensure that the inverter gets reconnected to the internet. Next one, thank you. If the installer is not the person registered to use the portal, the registration and capability testing steps that Charmaine walked through before can be completed remotely by a third party that has access to our portal. Our recommendation is that this is done while somebody is on site to confirm that that's been completed successfully and save on the need for a second visit. Next scenario. So there's no connection between the inverter and the meter. So we understood that this to be a scenario where a solar system might be installed on a shed, for example, fair way away from the residents. Under this Victorian government mandate, we must be able to limit export during a minimum demand event for both single and multi-inverter installations. So we're going to need a connection between inverters that are on site and the meter so that export can be limited when required. Next one, thank you. Capability test. So if the device has been successfully registered, however, the capability test is unable to be completed. So this could be caused by a couple of reasons. One might be if there's insufficient generation on site, or if there are technical issues to do with the equipment or the system. What we'd like you to do then is attempt the capability test at another time. As I mentioned before, this can be done remotely. If multiple attempts do not result in a successful outcome, please contact your OEM or our new energy services team, who will help diagnose your problem. Just a reminder that a successful capability test is a must for a site to be compliant, and a reminder that can be done remotely. Next one, thank you. So if a customer is connecting a battery to an existing rooftop solar system, so this is deemed an upgrade to generation capability, and therefore the whole site must be made compliant by ensuring that the rooftop solar system is emergency backstop enabled. And last scenario, thank you. All right, so now we've done all these steps to establish an emergency backstop mechanism, and AEMO have declared an emergency minimum demand event. So the steps that we need to take when an emergency minimum demand event is declared, we will publish a notification on our website that an event is in place, and we will curtail solar exports to meet the target demand. In these minimum demand events, we are given a target. So that is a demand increase that we need to achieve, which goes to all Victorian DNSPs. So our first instance of using the emergency backstop will curtail solar exports to 0 while still allowing self-consumption. If we cannot achieve the required demand increase, we may need to go further and turn generation off. That's all the scenarios we had pre-prepared. So Pat, I'll throw back to you for question time.
Thank you, Andrew. So that concludes the end of our formal presentation. I do hope that was useful to everybody in the call. Just a reminder, the content that we presented will be made on our available on our website shortly. Links will be sent both during and after the session as well. So please keep a lookout while we can. So as I mentioned at the start, your questions that were submitted to us before this presentation informed the scenarios that were just presented and also the content of our presentations. We wanted to leave this section as a bit of an open forum for anything that we might not have answered or anything that might have come up. So I can see there's been a flurry of conversation in the chat box, which has been terrific. I've got a few in front of me, so I'm just going to read them out. And again, if anything comes to mind, please do share them and they'll be escalated to myself. And again, it'll be Andrew, Charmaine, and also Dave Denny who will be responding to these questions that I'm about to read out. So thank you once again. So to begin with, I have a question regarding GMM option. In case of GMM option, will we shut down the generator or just curtail the export? Might direct that to you first, Andrew.
Sure, thanks, Pat. A GMM's a binary option, so there's no curtailing export with a GMM. The generation is either on or off. So in that instance, the generation will be off.
Simple. Any follow-up to that from the panel or? Simple answer, no problem. We'll move to the next question. So we do have a question about methane generator. So I assume just in regards to different types of generation behind the meter. So does the backstop apply? Bit of a broad question. I might go back to you again, Andrew, if you'd like to respond.
Sure, Pat. I think that's another straightforward one. So this is emergency backstop for rooftop solar only. So no methane generators at this stage.
Simple. Thanks, Andrew. So I'll go on to question 3 as well. Will there be multiple opportunities to perform the DER testing? So just thinking about trouble with overcast days and when solar isn't generating too much, and in winter time. So what will be the considerations there for those who will be installing solar? Charmaine, maybe this time I'll go to you.
Yeah, no problem. So we understand that conditions might not always be optimal to pass a successful capability test. You will have opportunities to be able to re-trigger that test. And as we mentioned through the presentation, it doesn't have to be done on site, so it can be done remotely. So when you've got optimal conditions, whether it's back in the office the next day or subsequent days later, you can actually re-trigger that test at any point in time, just by saving the application that you've started.
Excellent. Any other contribution to that? Not a problem. I'll move on to another question that we received. So what if the system is generating under 1 kilowatt, so winter and end of day, or it is fluctuating under 1 kilowatt due to clouds? Perhaps I'll go back to you, Charmaine, for that one.
Yep, so that would be the same. The actual test wouldn't actually pass, and you'll see an error message where it's testing sort of for that generation. You will have to unfortunately re-trigger that test when the conditions are okay to ensure that you get a successful capability test completed.
Thank you, Charmaine. So I'm just reading the questions as they come in. So thanks to the audience for posting. I do have another one. Yep. So is there any dispensation for customers in regional or rural areas where there are issues with Wi-Fi? So in relation to connectivity. Might throw that to you as well, Bales.
Thank you, Pat. There's no dispensation based on your location. So the requirement is that, all new inverters have to be CCPOS ready and internet enabled. If you are unable to practically connect the internet, For smaller inverters, 0 to 30 kVA, you are still allowed to connect, but you will be confined to 0 export.
Thank you. I have another one that's been directed at you as well, Andrew.
Cool.
So if solar containment fails to achieve the target, you talk of shutting off generation. Does this mean 100% curtailment?
100% curtail probably comes down to a definition. Basically, we will set a gen limit of 0. So we don't actually turn the inverter off, but we set it to generate 0. That's my understanding. Dave, you want to nod or?
Yeah, that's correct, Andrew. If the export limit isn't quite enough, we will then revert to issuing a gen limit 0.
Thank you, Dave. So moving on to our next question. So will a customer's inverter know and record it has had its exports turned off by the distributor? That's one for you, Dave Denny.
So the so the inverter will know it's had its export has been constrained by the inverter. Effectively, a lot of these sites are aggregator controlled, so the OEM will know where it's getting the signals from to send them to the inverter. Exactly what's lodged on the inverter, you'll have to discuss with your inverter manufacturers, how to see where the signals came from remotely, or whether the signal or the export was curtailed locally. So that's one for you to reach out to your OEMs for a bit more information.
Thank you, Dave. I have another one that's come up from a Will Cohen. Thanks, Will. In Gen 0, will an inverter charge a DC coupled battery? Might go back to you there, Dave.
In Gen 0, in generation 0, the output of the inverter will be restricted to 0. So it's I think the answer is no, it won't. But I think it's something that I will find out some more information from and get back to you for.
Yeah, I also have recorded here a no, but if we're unsure about that, we can follow up directly with you, Will. Thanks for submitting. I will move on to the next question. Another one for you, Dave Denny. Lots of questions coming for you. Is there a requirement for systems over 30 kilowatts for secondary protection?
So AS 4777.1 has changed very recently, so that now secondary protection or interface protection is no longer a requirement by the Australian standard. We're currently reviewing that as a network to understand what requirements we will need from a protection perspective for the network. So in short, the standard says that's not required unless the network requires it. So we're currently reviewing that internally.
Thank you, Dave. So moving on to the next question. This one's for you, Andrew. What is the forecast of backstop events from the data you've collected so far?
Okay, thanks, Pat. It's probably difficult to come up with an exact forecast on the number of events that we're going to experience because it's to do with the arrangement of the network. So if South Australia is exporting to Victoria, and if we lose the link to Tasmania, and if the smelter down at Portland suddenly stops generating, then that's going to really dictate whether a minimum demand event happens or not. I think what we can see from the forecast is that these events will increase into the future, as we install more and more renewable generation on the network, and they'll just be sort of endemic of the the energy transition that we're going through. So rare initially, but increasing in frequency.
Thanks, Andrew. I might also just pull up the second part of that question submitted by Ben. He's asking also, will there be any documentation made available to provide the customer on the likelihood of this scenario during handover? So I'm guessing forecasting data, that type of thing.
So I'm not aware we have any forecasting data available for the customer, but maybe we'll take that question on notice. It's probably a whole of industry thing. So the Australian Energy Market Operator does publish, market notices when they expect these sorts of events and information like that. but just how digestible that is for the customer, I'm not entirely sure. So why don't we'll take that back to our friends at AEMO.
No problem. Thanks, Andrew. I have another one that I will direct at you as well. So how will the scheme be enforced? If the initial connection is compliant, then the inverter is reprogrammed to not need the connection.
That's a good question. So clearly, to have an effective emergency backstop mechanism, we're highly reliant on installations being compliant. So if an inverter's been reprogrammed afterwards and is not compliant, through our smart meter data, we may be able to detect installations like this, and then we'll have to determine, what action is the most appropriate one. We'll certainly be looking at compliance once we've passed 1st of October, and once we're into a more, a more detailed regime where we're testing this functionality. And if devices don't respond accordingly, we'll be able to identify them.
Thanks, Andrew. So just a reminder to our audience, we do have a bit of extra time allocated just in case there are any more questions that are coming through. So if you'd like to use this opportunity to ask our presenters, please do. So I have another question coming in from Mal Price. So just in relation to notifications on our websites. So is there better methods to advise customers? So I think we'll table that just as some general feedback and look to provide that communication as to how we'll be providing those notices moving forward. But does anyone else on the panel have any comments on that?
No, I'll just say that, and I think it might have been touched on through the presentation, that where there is loss of connectivity for a customer, that we will be notifying customers of this if they've got a sustained loss of internet connection for 7 days, and then a follow-up reminder on day 14 also.
Great. So I see a question that's just come in as well from Jason Bradley. Will PowerCore provide a fact sheet that retailers could send with quotes, etc.? So I'm guessing by quotes, that could be a very specific term to your business. I mean, we will be providing quite a number of customer communications to help support customers through from the pre-proof through to commissioning stages. But in terms of providing quotes, that might be a matter more specific between the business and direct with customers. But I might just share that with the group as well, just in terms of how that will be followed up.
I think as far as the fact sheet goes, Pat, people could just refer to our website in the coming weeks for the the training materials and the information that we're going to publish, and that's probably the best spot to direct customers to if they have any questions about the emergency backstop mechanism or the government website that contains similar information.
Thank you. So I can see a few more questions that my colleagues are answering to directly, but it looks like that probably wraps up the questions that are being submitted to us. Before I close up this session, I might just go once more around the presenters if there are any key takeaways or messages that you'd like to leave the audience before we wrap this up. I just start with you, Andrew.
No, nothing like being put on the spot. No key messages from me. Just thank you everybody for attending. We appreciate this as a bit of a change. It's quite a change for us as well. But we're happy to work with you to ensure that we have an effective backstop mechanism and customers can continue to install and export solar as they want to do.
Thank you. Any final remarks from the group? Charmaine or Dave?
No, I think very similar to Andrew, just thank you for coming along. We know that there's a lot of information to wrap your heads around, and it's not going to be a smooth transition. It's, we're always going to have teething issues, but we appreciate your support, and please feel free to reach out if there's anything else we can do to help you through this transition, and prepare to get on board for the 1st of October changes.
Great. Well, I'll assume that wraps it up from the presentation and also the Q&A as well. So all questions or comments that we picked up and noted, we'll take it away and answer you directly if we haven't been able to during this session. But aside from that, if I may leave you as well with one final message, is that please, between now and October 1st and moving forward, do engage our networks directly. The contact details will be shared with you. We're here to support you in these changes, and also how stakeholders are being brought along this change with us. So please do reach out to us at any point, and that includes any other DB in Victoria as well. So from that note, I might close it there. Once again, thank you all very much for joining us today. We will be publishing a recording of this webinar very shortly. And please be sure to visit our websites once available. All of the content that you've just seen will be published there in due course. Thank you.